Today we're going to be doing a deep dive on the AWS Security Hub. My name's Rick Harvey. I'm a software as a service solutions architect here at AWS with the startup team. I'm going to be diving in and having a look at Security Hub with you. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a demo with you as well, and all the code is available on GitHub. Don't forget, we'll be sending these slides out at the end of the talk, and you can get them from the handout section. And if you've got any questions, there's a little questions section within the GoToWebinar software. Ask a question there, and I'll see how many of those I can answer at the end of this presentation. So let's get started. Let's look at Security Hub and why we have Security Hub. So when we talk about security and particular cloud and AWS, there's lots of components to a security solution. First of all, we need to kind of identify all the resources we've got, and this is going to give you some context to why Security Hub is useful because of all these different components here. When we look at identifying what we've got in AWS, we've got a couple of systems already. We have the Systems Manager and AWS Config. If you've not seen AWS Config before, it's a solution for a piece of software that basically looks at your account per region and logs the configuration settings and what you're running in that particular region and keeps it as a store. If anything changes, you can trigger actions off there to either alert you or automatically shut things down that don't comply. So it's a great tool for that. And Systems Manager, if you're not familiar with that, is a tool that will allow you to go in and manage things like EC2 instances without the need for logging into those machines via SSH, which today is often considered quite an anti-pattern of work. So with Systems Manager, you can select a fleet of similar machines, issue a command that gets run across that entire fleet for you and monitored and checked that it's actually worked. The next important thing in our security process is protection. How do we keep an eye on all the things we're spinning up in our AWS account? Well, yet again, there's lots of different solutions, and it depends on what you're deploying as a customer to do this. Now, there's some tools that we'll all use no matter what we're doing. For example, IAM, Identity Access Management. This is something that you'll use to control access to AWS by your users, and that being your company employees. But you can also use it to go in there and give instances or Lambda functions permissions to do certain things within your account, so you can have IAM roles as well. We've then got things like Firewall Manager, which is a nice way to manage security groups. We've got some extended firewalls, such as the Web Application Firewall, which is a Layer 7 firewall for protecting your web application behind it from incoming threats. And then we've got other tools out there like the IoT Device Defender, which constantly monitors all your IoT devices. Then once we've got all this information and we're logging and we've got control and protection around it, we need to actually look at what's happening. And there's a few tools that we can use here. There's AWS Inspector. And Inspector basically scans your EC2 instances regularly for known vulnerabilities. This might be from like the CVE vulnerability database, for example. We then have Macie, which runs in some regions, and Macie will actually actively scan the data that you're uploading to S3 buckets, for example, to see if it believes, using artificial intelligence and machine learning, that there is any sensitive and private identifiable information in there. If it detects that there is, and it detects that that object you've uploaded is actually public, it can take action on your behalf and lock access to that down straight away. So quite a cool little tool there for protecting proactively data that you may have mislabeled as it gets uploaded. We then have Guard Duty. Guard Duty is quite interesting, and we're going to have a quick look at that today. Guard Duty will let you will sit and monitor your account for different types of attack or misconfigurations that may have been in. In fact, in the demo that I'm going to do, you'll see that I've deliberately misconfigured a EC2 instance to have a security group that allows connectivity from anywhere in the world on any port. This is something you should never do, but this has now triggered an event in GuardDuty that's logged in into the system, and we can dive in and see the ins and outs of that. So what do you do once you've detected something? Well, there's a couple of things you might want to do. You might want to automate a response, like I talked about with Macie, and we can use CloudWatch events on this, or we can use Lambda link direct into Macie to lock down that data. Or we might use the Lambda to send us an alert. We might send that over to Slack or to email, or open a ticket in your ticketing system, for example. The other thing to do there as well is to investigate. So CloudWatch and CloudTrail will allow you to see how that particular event happened and correlate the two sets of API calls and logs from your application together to see what's happening. And then from that, you've got your recovery stance of security incidents. So if you've taken regular snapshots or use archive, you can get your data back to a known good point in time that is secure. You can also use this for forensic investigation. So in the event of an EC2 instance being exploited because of an application on there that was insecure, that hadn't been updated, you could spin up a version of that with a clean data from a snapshot to actually have a look and see what happened and how it worked. So you can take that to pieces and make sure that you can start your life cycle again and you're protected from it. So that's quite a lot of things. And with that bit of context I've given you there, this is kind of why we've still got quite a few challenges to face. We need to ensure that our AWS infrastructure meets compliance standards. So I mentioned things like GuardDuty and config. Within there, we can set compliance standards. So we could say that all EC2 instances must have a certain patch level, and Inspector can check that patch level. If it hasn't, it will fall out of security. So we can use these tools to do this. But the problem here is we've got multiple formats. I've mentioned GuardDuty, I've mentioned config, and there's different formats, different tools, and a lot of data are starting to gather now. So how do we prioritize that amount of data coming at us from all these different products that help build layered security up around your application and your account? How do we look at that? Well, really, we need a single pane of glass to pull all this data in and standardize it in a nice, easy-to-use format where we can configure all our alerting, our automated actions. And this is where Security Hub comes in. So Security Hub can take multiple inputs. And when I say multiple inputs here, I can talk about GuardDuty, Macie, Inspector, and then we have partner integrations as well. So we've currently got 28 partner integrations with Security Hub, and these can bring in extra information into a single pane of glass that you can then use to add extra layers of security around your account. And from all of these, because the data is normalized, we can take automatic action. So we can either close and suspend an EC2 instance. We could limit the concurrency on a Lambda function if we script this. So we've got different ways of doing this. So some benefits to Security Hubs. The Security Hub approach is it's a regional service, so you'll see all the information aggregated across all your different products within that region in one pane of glass, and that makes it easier to actually digest that information in there. You can manage all those findings, and when I say a finding, that is a normalized version of data coming in. So if you've got a third-party product like Splunk, for example, the data coming in that will be in a different format to data coming in from an F5 firewall, for example. And they'll be different from GuardDuty logs, which are different from config logs, which are different from CloudWatch events. So a finding is a way of taking that data, manipulating it into a standard format, and showing that through a single location. And then you can also use Insight dashboards onto this. So Insights allow you to track your environment, and you'll be able to see over time if you're improving your security stance or if it's dropping down a little bit. So let's have a little bit of talk about the workflow of this. The workflow is really, really easy to enable to start with. First of all, you log into the console, you navigate over to Security Hub, and for that particular region, you enable Security Hub. This will automatically bring on guard duty and config if you've got them configured, and inspector findings into the Security Hub panel. And then from there, you can actually add other tasks in there and other information coming in. The nice thing about Security Hub as well is if you want to use multiple AWS accounts, within Security Hub, you can actually add permission. And if anybody's ever done anything like VPC peering in the past, where you send a connection request to the other account, and then they have to log in the console and click accept, it's a very similar workflow and process to that. So you request with an account ID and an email access to their Security Hub information. They'll get a response they click and reply to, and then you can aggregate all that data within that single workflow as well. So if you're working across organizations, it makes it quite nice. Now, one of the things that was mentioned about this quite early on was that it only showed account IDs. And if you've got 200 accounts, account IDs are quite hard to keep track of in your mind. So we needed a nicer way. And if you're using AWS organizations, there's now a way to tag those account IDs to a named account to make that a little bit more easy to read and understandable in a human format. So once you've got it configured, Security Hub will continuously analyze all these plethora of logs that are coming in. It'll take them from different sources, it will normalize them, and then it will do things with compliance checks and scans. So depending on your settings of how strict you want to be on your infrastructure settings, you can have automated checks happen. And when the checks happen and something fails and falls out of compliance, that's when you can take action based on those findings. You can either set an SNS alert off that will simply email, or you can have a Lambda run to automate some action for you. So I mentioned compliance standards. There's an inbuilt set of compliance standards with Security Hub called CIS, and what these will do is it's a benchmark of how secure your AWS account is. So this will check things like, do you have a password policy set in IAM? In that password policy, do you require one uppercase, one lowercase, one alphanumeric, and those kind of questions. It'll also see if you've done sensible things like disable the programmatic access from the root account, and you've got IAM users in there rather than always logging in with a root account, and it'll provide you a score on that. So it's looking for best practices of how you manage your security stance on AWS. Because after all, AWS is a shared responsibility model. Now, there's quite a few examples of this. If you look on YouTube, for example, about shared responsibility within AWS, there's some really good talks from reInvent last year. And it talks about how, depending on which product you use, we remove a lot of the heavy lifting for you of looking after your security settings, but there's still certain things that you're responsible for. For example, on EC2, we look after all the stack below, but once you're inside the operating system, the updates to that particular OS is your responsibility to do regularly and frequently. And that's where things like Inspector can really help. Inspector can look and notice a machine that's not been updated, has patches out of date, and it can generate an alert. But if you want to go further, you can bring that in and bring that into Security Hub to get more detailed information and actually prioritize it. If it's a internal only facing box, you might want to remove some of the urgency on getting that patched if there's a public facing production box that has the same issue, for example. So when you set it up, security findings are all grouped together and pulled in, so you can actually see that the information coming from guard duty also matches something that's happened on Inspector, and it will group them together so you can see the correlation between those different security events that's happening across your account and across the products you may be using to secure your account. There's more than 20 pre-built insights, and we've also got the AWS partner stuff as well. Now, you can also create your own insights. So this is kind of like a dashboard. So if you want to have a dashboard for a particular fleet of machines, a fleet of instances, to see what their security stance is, you can create that. And we're adding more and more services as we go along, because Security Hub at the moment is in preview mode. So this is an evolving product that's moving along. Some of the examples we've got here, we've got EC2 instances that have missing security patches. But the ones I particularly like to use are the ones with S3. I use S3 for a lot of things. And if I was to misconfigure an S3 bucket and accidentally make my data open to the public, that's not a good place to be in. So using Security Hub, I can make sure that with the CIS rules, my CIS rule says do not allow public buckets. If that was to happen, I have an automated response which goes through and actually removes those public permissions from that bucket and locks it down for me. It will also email me to tell me it's done it. So if I did want to create a public bucket, I'd have to go in there and whitelist that so it doesn't happen. Security Hub's available in 15 regions at the moment. The big list on the screen will show you where you can start using this. I'm going to do my demo in EU Ireland. It's also worth noting that you have to enable this in each region you want it to run. And there are certain things that are of a global account setting that if you want that to appear, you need to enable it in the US East North Virginia region as well. So this is used by customers today. I said it's in preview, but we've got some pretty big customers such as Airbnb and GoDaddy and the Pokemon Company are all using this today to aggregate the plethora of data that they've got coming from their security systems. And it makes it very simple and easy for them to manage that huge amount of data that's flowing in to keep them secure. And when you think of things like the US Bank, that's a really good thing for them to have a nice security stance, an easy to understand security stance that doesn't require them looking at 8 different systems. So I've mentioned this a couple of times. This is extendable with partner support. So we've got a few partners in different spaces. Obviously, right the way from firewalls over to managed security service providers, which are MSSPs, and these will actually put in things like WAF rules and manage WAF rules for your particular product. All these can export its data into the Security Hub system, and then that can be normalized, and that data you can decide whether it's going to cause an alert or is just going to go on a backlog for you to do as and when needed. So if we look at an example with one of our partners, CrowdStrike, this is a Python application. This Python application basically sits there and looks for AWS API information, and if it finds EC2 instances that match, it will then enhance that data. If there's a problem with it, it will enhance that data with some metadata and return that as a response into the Security Hub. So you'll get a deeper insight. So you'll be able to not only just see the instance, but in the Security Hub, you'll be able to do things like pick up which Elastic Network interface is the particular problem in this instance. So rather than just having to go on the box and do an investigation, you've got a very clear, this is a problem on this network. I can see what security group that belongs to. I can see the problem. I can fix this. So it makes things a lot easier. And then we've got Armor. These are MSSP. And the really nice thing about this is that you just go into their console and you flick a switch to say, please integrate with Security Hub. And that's it. That's how easy it is to set up. So once you've become once you've started using from the marketplace the Armor software, you just switch it on and it's integrated with Security Hub instantly. So it's a really smooth experience to actually switch that on. So if you're a Armor user already, that could be quite a nice thing to look at. So I mentioned you have to enable this in each region. Now, you'll see here that at the top of every slide I've actually included a URL and with further reading on the particular subject on the slide. So we've got a getting started guide, but it really is simple. In order to switch this on, you literally go to the Security Hub in the console and you click Enable AWS Security Hub. That's it. You need to do it for each region, and you need to make sure you've got a service role permission, which is created when you use AWS config and guard duty, for example. But this will all be automated and set up for you. Multi-account setup's really easy as well. I mentioned this is very much like enabling VPC peering or consolidated billing, where you send a request to the other account and then you go in and say, yes, I want to accept that. Very similar feature there. Now, I mentioned findings a few times, and normalized data I think I've said quite a lot as well. So if we think about all the different data formats that's coming in, we need to really take that data and consider, is it really crucial? Is it a level 100 event, or is it down in the 30s? Is it not that much to worry about? But because we're aggregating information from several different systems, we can take that and kind of add it together. So we may have seen that sensitive data has been uploaded to an S3 bucket. Now that S3 bucket may be secure, it may be locked down to internal use only, have nice ACLs on there, and it's all good. But we should still give a weight to that information, because then if we go into our config and we then require as a business that we want to have encryption on all S3 buckets by default, the data in that bucket may not be encrypted by default. So this should add a weight. So now we know it's sensitive information, which wouldn't trigger an alarm normally because it was secure, but it now doesn't, it's now not encrypted at rest. So that will add to it and we'll now get a higher alert. So we get a normalized severity of normalization come through. So we can choose to act on that more quickly than some of the less crucial work that we need to do. When you go in and look at the automated compliance checks, I mentioned CIS, Center for Internet Security. You'll see how your account fares to this. And this kind of depends on what region you're in at the moment and where you start playing around with this, but it's a good quick view. And this screen that's on there at the moment, that's one of the insights that I've mentioned. That's what the insights look like. You can go in there and you can actually dig in and click onto different AMIs to see if they're failing checks, or you can go in and look at EC2 instances and elastic network interfaces and security groups. All this information can get pulled up into these insights so you can click through, and we'll have a quick look at that in the console in a second. So one of the things we're going to demo today is a customizable response, and we're actually going to send an email because it's easier for me to demo sending an email than trying to set up a third-party integration with another service. So we're going to do an email. So basically we're going to have an event created, CloudWatch goes in there, and there's a rule in CloudWatch that then we could do a Lambda function or a step function. In my case, I'm just going to push to an SNS topic, and that SNS topic is going to send me an email. Now the code for this, you'll be pleased to know, is at this URL here. We'll make sure this gets sent out with the slides so you can get to this. I'm just going to flick over to my browser now, and we've actually got two samples on this. So if you've ever been to the AWS samples on GitHub, so if you go to github.com/AWS-samples and search for Security Hub, you'll see two demo CloudFormation scripts. One of them will send Security Hub alerts to email. One of them will actually ping it into a Slack channel for you. So if your organization is using Slack to go in and that's how you handle and aggregate all the information coming in, that's quite a useful script to have. Now, the one we're going to look at today is Security Hub to email. And I'm just going to walk through this. So let's make sure I've still got console access here. So I'm going to refresh that. No, log in again. I spoke for too long, so it all timed out. Here we go. So I'm now logging into my AWS account, and first of all, I'm going to go to CloudFormation, and in CloudFormation, I'm going to create a new stack. And this new stack, here we go. Let's just move everything out of the way. Create stack. I'm going to upload from a template, and that template is called Security Hub to email. And I'm going to hit next. Now, this is where following the instructions letter by letter is quite good, because you'll need these settings a bit later on as you build up and iterate on this process. But we're not going to go too deep into it today. Now, this email address of an email to receive the Security Hub findings, I'm actually going to put in my non-work email here. And I'm going to hit next, and that's just going to basically create a subscription request for me as I set it up within SNS. So I'm going to set all the permissions on here and create the stack. Now, this is quite a simple stack to create. So if we have a look at the events happening here, you'll see that we're creating a findings topic within SNS, so that's all being created. And let's just wait for this to push. There we go. I've got an email already. So that's saying to me that I've now got a subscription notification to an SNS topic. SNS is simple notification, and you can actually have SNS push to HTTP endpoint. You can have it send text messages, or you can have it send emails. So I'm just going to confirm my subscription to this whilst we wait. And then we're going to drop back in and have a look and see if the stack is fully built yet. Not yet, it should be there soon. And if we go back to here, what I'm going to show you now is in SNS. And if I drop into my topics here, I've got a send findings to topic queue. This is basically where I push messages to that get pushed out. And you can see that the subscription is one user subscribed, and it's my email address, and that's confirmed. If you wanted to add somebody else, you could hit from here, create subscription. You choose what type of information you want to come. So I could say email again, and here I could put in my work email address. Oh. Because I said the word email, I typed email. There we go, and we can say create subscription. And if you look back now in the topics, you'll see that one of them is pending confirmation, because I've not gone through and clicked on that yet. Let's quickly drop back to CloudFormation. And we can see that the whole thing has now been created. So the event that's happened here is we've enabled Security Hub's finding email. We've got an SNS policy, and we've created a user in SNS as well. So all those actions have taken place. Now, if we drop through now to Security Hub, obviously it needed the spacing for the search. The first thing I'm going to do is, let's close that out of the way. I've been experimenting today. So if you go into settings, you'll see on here that I've currently got no custom actions. So if we drop back to the GitHub instructions here, one of the things it wants us to do here is go through and enable Security Hub, which I've already done. And then we're going to create security action, a custom action here. So we're going to go here, and I'm going to say create custom action, and in here we'll say send email to SNS topic, and the custom action ID, I can't remember what that actually is, so we'll have a look at that, is just send to email. So this is something you could customize, and you could make it do what you want really. You could create a custom action that triggers a Lambda, for example. So there's lots of different things you can do. Now, because I've preformed all this in the background with CloudFormation, this will basically just work. So it already knows there's a custom action send to email. And then let's just double check everything we've done here. We need to customize this email notification. So if I was just to send an email like this, I'd get a big blob of JSON and it wouldn't make much sense to an end user to read it. It wouldn't be a very pretty email. So one of the things we can do if we go to CloudWatch, we can go in there and the event that gets triggered, we can start to normalize that information. So if we have a look at event rules, we'll have one that's just been created for Security Hub findings to email. And if we click on this, what we can do is edit. And then on this right-hand side, we can actually do an input transformer. So we can start changing the data of how it looks. So we can take that JSON and we can put it into a nice little template. So this is what I'm expecting from the JSON, and you can actually get more information about this in all the developer documentation. So don't worry about it being a big blob of JSON at the moment. And then this input template here is the bit that's the transformation. What I'm saying is use variables such as finding and findings description, which you can see all in here, but I'm just using them in this section here. And now I say configure details, update the rule, and that's all done. So I've now got a Security Hub response. So my Security Hub now, if it finds something new, can actually trigger an alert and send me an email. So I know straight away that there's an incident that's happened. Now, as you can see on here, I've managed to create lots of dummy events to so we can dive in and have a look. One of the nice things that you can actually dive in and have a look at is we can have a look at compliance standards on here. And you can see that I've only got 17% compliance on my account. And part of this is because there's a way to actually dig in and throw some fake results at Security Hub so you can start testing all your custom responses. And you can do that through guard duty. So you'll see some events further down in here if we have a look at EC2, for example. Can we just search for EC2? Yeah. So, oh no, we can't. We have to actually enter an ID. Let's not do that. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. But basically, you can look at different things that's happened. On here, I'm seeing at the moment in our findings window, I'm seeing things like there's some administrative policies that allow everything. Do we really want that? And on here, what I can do, if I click something, I can actually do a manual test here. So I've now got this new little section here called Send to Email. If I hit that, that's sent a CloudWatch event notification, and eventually I will get an email pop up in here. I just got to wait for normal email latency to go through. So this is like an overview of all the different security things that can happen. On here you can see these are like AWS accounts. I've passed an IAM policy here, but you can dig in and we can actually look at status and we can look at all the failed events. Now, one of them that I had configured, which if we can dig in and find it, there's the email just come through our custom action. So if I dig in here, I get a message saying Security Hub has found an issue for my account ID, and it'll go through and it's used the template from the JSON to actually create me an email that's humanly readable rather than a big blob of JSON, which would be quite hard to do. So this has allowed me to go in and quickly identify what the problem is, and I can see that the fail in this case was a CIS problem, which is a best practice for AWS, the Cloud Information Security Standards. So all that will allow me to identify things more quickly. Now, if I dig in on some of these here, you can see here that I've got different instances running, and I can see how many findings per instance. So I've got an instance here. I can click in and go down, and one of the things that I deliberately did on this was I actually configured the instance to have no security group rules. Well, it has got a rule. It says anything on any port, on any protocol is allowed to access this instance. So we know I've got an unprotected instance, and on here, guard duty has actually detected somebody's port scanning that instance. Somebody's having a look at it to see if they can do anything nasty to it. So guard duty has popped up and says, this is being probed. Here, it will actually go in and say somebody's trying to brute force my SSH. So guard duty is looking at my account, looking at the network flow coming in, and it's got that detail and it's put it into a single pane of glass. I'm not having to jump between guard duty and inspector, for example. So on here, I can see that Amazon Inspector has noticed that I've got a port open, 23, Telnet. It's reachable from the internet. But guard duty is a different program. If I was using these individually and not via Security Hub, I'd be hopping all over the console to try and aggregate and pull this information together. The beauty of Insights on here is that I've just been able to go in and have a look at one of our pre-configured settings, which is AWS resources. I've been able to then pick out the instance with the most findings. So I've identified the one that's probably the worst configured, and go in and actually have a look at all the different security events from this. And we can go here and we can set this to severity. Let's put medium's our highest. We've not got any major severities here. So Inspector, for example, might pick up that I've got a vulnerable version of OpenSSL, for example. If I had, I could have that come up as a high vulnerability. And if I detected I got a high vulnerability, I could actually say, well, that's OpenSSL, or that's SSH, for example, that's vulnerable. If it's SSH that's vulnerable, one of the rules is I'm going to automatically lock down SSH access to anyone. So I could block that off. I could automate that action. And without being able to see this in a single pane of glass, trying to get that amount of information together across many, many machines and many, many instances and different parts of AWS becomes quite a heavy job for you to do. So Security Hub is making that a lot easier. Some of the other compliance standards and testings we can actually look at. So some of this is compliant, some isn't, by design, just so I could show you. I don't normally run my account this badly. Please don't judge me. We go in here and I can see that I could set, for example, if credentials aren't used for 90 days, let's disable them, because that's probably somebody who's left the business, and we don't want those kind of accounts hanging about that could become a problem in the future. We can ensure that keys are rotated every 90 days or less. We can do all these kind of things, and we can avoid the use of the root account. There's also, you can enforce that MFA is installed on the root account and on IAM accounts as well. So all of these are different tests against how well you've set up your AWS security posture. So it's all built in for you straight away. But like I said, you can add integrations from anywhere. I've simply got on here Guard Duty Inspector Macie and the compliance standards, but I could go in and I could pick any of our partners if I'm running their software. For example, WAF for F5 networks. I could go down there and put McAfee or Sophos in there and have those reports all pulled back in here. So in the case of our findings, and if we look at Insights, and we look at the findings for this particular machine, if I was running Sophos or McAfee on here and I detected a file that got a virus on as well, I could also have that information aggregated into this single pane of glass about that very particular instance. So I know I should isolate that straight away and stop spreading that file with a virus on, for example. So if we just flick back to the slides again for that, after diving in and having a look at some of the features in there, there's a lot of information to take in. So please do ask questions in a second, and I'll do my best to answer those. And we're also sending the slides out, which have got lots of links throughout the slides, which will let you dive in and get more and more information. Some of the key takeaways I wanted to give you today were understanding that you can manage all of your AWS security and compliance posture from that single pane of glass, which makes it easier. You can put those compliance against regulatory best practices. So we saw the CIS rule set. You can import other rule sets that may be specific to the industry you're working in, for example, and you can work to those. Some of our partners will provide those rule sets for you as well. You can collect and process all those security findings from multiple accounts within a particular region. Be aware this is a regional thing, so you'll need to do it for each region, for each account as well. And then you can prioritize that information into, do I wake someone up at 3 a.m. to say there's a big security issue, or is it quite minor and can it wait? So you can do that kind of logic and business logic to your work as well. Or you can take automated action and just lock that system out for the time being. Okay, we're going to drop into the questions section, but I also wanted to make sure that you've got my email address, which is rjh@amazon.com. And you can ask me any questions on there. You can drop me emails and I'll endeavour to get back to you as quickly as possible. You can also ping me on Twitter. That's @Rick without the K and 2_ Harvey. And please feel free to ping me on those. My direct messages are open as well. Also, if you want inviting to the Slack channel, we've got an AWS Developer Slack channel. You'll need an invite. If you DM me on Twitter, I'll get that invited to you so you can come on and talk to other experts at AWS and community members to talk about any of the products and how you can get help on them.